we'll now get ready for our next panel discussion, and it will be led by Paul Hendry. So Paul is the Vice President of HSE at Jacobs, and he will chair a discussion with 4 senior female leaders in his company who have made their way in their career to their current positions. Each of them has taken a different journey in different continents, and their path has certainly not been linear. So I'm confident this will be an informative and inspiring discussion. So I'll hand over to Paul to lead the discussion. Thanks again, Paul, for coming.
Hey, Melissa, thank you. And thank you for the invite. I think, OneWish is really important for occupational health and safety professionals to really, break that bias. I'm someone who has really benefited from having a diverse team with female leaders. Each of these female leaders on this call have risen with me. I wouldn't be in my position if it wasn't for them. So I know the benefits of having that diverse team, and each of them on this call are really important to me. How we're going to run this session is well, OneWish wanted me to talk about strategy and how I have so many female leaders in my global leadership team. And the truth is, I never had a strategy. The fact of the matter was that I only realised that the leadership team was female and male 50-50 when I had a meeting in Dallas and we all got together. I think there was 20 of us in the room, and it was like the most phenomenal meeting, and it set us up for the last 2 years actually. And it was only there I realised that we really did have a diverse team, but I can assure you there was no strategy. I'm not that smart. I think what I've just realised is people who can contribute and add value and have talent, you can't hold them back, and that's how we've ended up with this 50-50 split. And we also have got Jennifer, Fiona, Amanda on the call. There's also people like Stephanie, Yvonne, Suzanne, Suki, Carla, Kim, Lisa, and many others who could have joined on this call with me. So what we're going to do with this format, we'll do a little introduction to the team, and we're going to, quite similar actually to the previous one, which was an excellent session, by the way, well done everyone. We're going to just start talking about people's experiences in their career based on some questions. And really, when we were prepping for this and I was having a discussion with the team, I was kicking myself, because if I could have recorded the one-to-one conversations I had with each of them, they would have been gold. And it was a real eye-opener for me to understand again some of the challenges that they've all went through. And that's why, none of their paths have been the same, and they've certainly not been linear. So I'll go to introductions to the team first. So Jennifer, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Jennifer Gagnier, and I'm the health and safety professional for the western part of the U.S. for our business and infrastructure group. Little history on me is I waited a couple of years before I went to college. I paid for my schooling myself, so I worked full-time while I went to college. So I wasn't out in your typical 3-4 years. I graduated at 28, so I started the profession a little bit later. I've been in the industry over 30 years now. And one thing that's different than some of my colleagues, well, actually, all the rest that are on here, is I did not have kids going through having to juggle that with a career. So I focused pretty much my attention on my spouse and my career. So that's me.
Thanks, Jen. Fiona?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, hi, everyone. So my name is Fiona O'Donnell, and I am currently head of safety for Jacobs for the European part of the business. I started my career off in construction before moving to a corporate role in 2008. And I suppose since taking up that role, I've worked with the Irish operations. I'm based here in Ireland. Then I moved into a role within the UK, and since 2019, I've been in my current role, which is covering Europe. Outside of work, I have 3 young daughters. I have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So very busy house. I caught the end of the last session, and I heard, I think it was Louise may be saying that she never really had a plan for her career, and I can totally relate to that, because I suppose the relationships that I made along the way kind of brought me into all the roles that I've had in my career. So no real plan, but thoroughly enjoying what I'm doing at the moment.
Thanks, Fiona, and I'm pretty sure one of your daughters will come in on the call as we're speaking.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, thanks, Fiona. Amanda Aldred.
Yes, I was wondering which Amanda would be up. So hi, I'm Amanda Aldred. I'm the Head of Health, Safety, Environment and Welfare for our major programs and projects group for Europe, and also in the global space as well. I actually started my career in human resources, so I actually do have a degree in HR. Did about 12 months of HSE within that particular qualification. Absolutely enjoyed it. So had essentially jumped into a HSE career before I actually finished my HR studies. So again, sort of stepped into retail. So that was kind of my first exposure to health and safety, and have moved across a number of different industries, including local government, construction, and then, into engineering as well. So, and a mother of a 14-year-old boy. So majority of my career has been as a single mum, but it certainly hasn't stopped the progression through my career. So really excited to be on the panel today. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. And Amanda Aldred has just relocated from Sydney to Manchester, and and I think we should all send our pity to her. Amanda Finnegan.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for having me.
To her. Amanda Finnegan.
Hi, thanks for having me, everybody. Amanda Finnegan. I am an HSE manager here in the US in Denver, Colorado. I help support Jen's team, and then in the last year or so started supporting Paul with our Mental Health Matters program. I actually started, I went to school for biopsych, an animal behavior degree, and then figured out pretty quickly that wasn't for me. So went back to school for safety in Montana, and then that led me up to Alaska. So I spent the bulk of my career, oil and gas, heavy construction up in Alaska. So about 13 years up there. And then the last 7 years I've been down in Colorado. I'm married with 2 kids, a 10-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, and just love getting out and about in Colorado, and spend a lot of time stand-up paddleboarding and resetting out in nature. So thanks.
Hey, thanks, Amanda. And you can see, why we put in the session description that, the paths are not the same. Each of you guys, I see you guys as being really different in character, skill set, behaviours, etc. And I think that was really important to make a diverse team. So I'm going to ask a question to each of you. Just spend maybe a minute answering it. So what type of barriers have you faced, perhaps that I wouldn't have faced in your career? A barrier that is perhaps unique to females.
Will I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely having a family and trying to build a career. I know, I definitely felt, I'm going to say almost embarrassed, right, being pregnant in this industry. I felt like I really had to prove something that the men that I was working with didn't, and I almost, I've had 3 kids, and I almost hid the fact that I was pregnant. There was definitely an embarrassment about it, and I tried. I was in construction. I was still on construction projects for the first 2 of those pregnancies, and I did some ridiculous. I know we were talking about this the other day, but I did some ridiculous stuff at kind of 8 or 9 months pregnant, climbing scaffolds and just silly things that I felt like I just really had to do in order to prove that I was the very same as everybody else on the project. And I don't ever remember any of the men on site making me feel like that. That was a pressure, I think, that I put on myself. But definitely having a family and still trying to put in the hours that it takes to get the job done was a really tough challenge for me, I think.
Yeah, okay, cool. Look, can I ask you one more question on that then? You know, what would you have felt like? What would your reaction have been like if someone had intervened and said, "Hey, Fiona, I don't want you climbing that scaffold"?
I probably would have told them where to go, to be honest. Probably. And maybe the fact that nobody did says a lot about what my reaction would have been. But yeah, just yeah. When I think back on it, particularly the scaffold incident, should never really happened. But I did genuinely feel that I had to do it, that I didn't really have a choice. And then, you know, coming back, having my kids, and then coming back to work very quickly after having them and not taking that time, because I think, again, there was nothing overtly said, or there was no kind of direction given, but I think just that feeling that if I didn't come back, I was going to miss out, or somebody might actually take my place. So that's a really was a really difficult kind of time for me.
Yeah, one of the previous panelists mentioned fear, so maybe that was part of that. Yeah. Jennifer?
I don't know if I had necessarily one that you might not have encountered, but I think I had probably two that were unique. One was the fear or the intimidation that was tried to be imposed on me for doing my job. A large part of my career was spent in and around the Chicagoland area and dealing with the Chicago unions. And earlier in my career, you know, 30 pounds lighter, much younger, out in the field, where, you know, you were the only woman out in the field. I take that back. There was one laborer and there was one millwright. That was it, out of maybe 1,500 men. And so they all knew who you were. And I remember early on, I had found a guy that was up on a ladder, probably, you know, several feet above a handrail, exposed to over a 40-foot fall. Called him down, had a conversation with him, brought him back into the trailer, talked to the job superintendent, and we had a zero tolerance policy. So they ran the guy off. The guy happened to be an electrician. And so what that meant was he wasn't necessarily out of a job. He went back to the union hall, and then the union was responsible for finding him another place to go, but he was not allowed back at our location. So shortly after that, I was assigned a company vehicle, which one of our trade partners utilized during the day, and I'm not going to mention the trades. But one of their guys came up to me to try to strong arm me and basically intimidate me, because this guy got removed from the job site and basically said, you know, you better think about checking your lug nuts every time you go down the interstate at, you know, 70 miles an hour. They might not all be tight. And he was trying to do what he could to intimidate me so that maybe I wouldn't, you know, challenge somebody again, or I wouldn't report something in. So that was something definitely that stuck with me my whole career. It didn't faze me, but it was something that I don't know necessarily if maybe any of my other counterparts that were on the job site that were men would have faced. So
yeah. Look, I think so thanks for sharing that. I think that, you know, intimidation like that, probably most safety professionals, particularly in construction, have faced it. I know I have. I think where you've probably had the talent to diffuse it differently from me, I think that's probably pretty evident, where it probably have escalated, you know, where you've managed to kind of diffuse it and still not backtrack on your decisions. So I think that'd be really important. Amanda Aldred. Sorry.
I was going to say, sorry, I was just going to say the other flip side to that maybe you don't face is there is a fine line between being assertive as a woman and I'm just going to say it, being perceived as a bitch. And it's a very fine line. And when men are assertive, they're not necessarily looked at as demeaning or whatever. They're embraced and they're celebrated because of that. And I don't really necessarily feel that that's the same for women. And it's always a fine line, always, to this day, I think.
Yeah.
And there's different, sorry, Paul, I think there's just different forms of it. I mean, that was a clear kind of aggression that you faced, Jennifer. I know I certainly faced something more subtle and more of a sexual nature, in that I got a hand delivered box with a sexy nightie in it from a senior member of staff on the program. Now, I dealt with it, I think, very professionally, and he was made aware in uncertain terms that it wasn't acceptable. But thereon there was just this level of fear is probably too strong a word, but it was definitely a form of intimidation. And thankfully, look, I've not had to deal with it too many times in my career, but that's probably one of the most serious ones that I came up against. But that sent a message to me, and the message was that, he was definitely trying to intimidate me and influence how I was going to behave on site. It didn't work, obviously, but it was a scary thing to have happened.
Yeah, I'm really embarrassed for that person right now. I wonder what the next day would have been like at the job site.
Do you know what? He's still floating about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm going to move on to the next question. So apologies, Amanda. In case you've had this amazing preparation for that first question, just mindful of time. But look, Amanda Aldred, what changes have you been responsible for, either in the industry or within Jacobs or a previous organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I did have something amazing prepped as well for a response to the previous question.
Sorry, Amanda.
No, that's okay. Look, not too dissimilar to everyone's stories, but I think it just comes with the territory. But I think we've certainly made our mark in the industry as an industry now, and that behaviour is certainly not tolerated anymore. But look, I think in terms of changes I've made, I'd like to think that I've coached and mentored, a number of successful women in the industry. There was always some apprehension coming into health and safety as an industry, especially for the reasons, that Fiona and Jennifer went through around, the way that women were treated pretty early on in the industry. I have brought in, some women who have really been keen in terms of HSE careers and really sort of fostered and developed the talent, and they're now heading up sort of regional sort of lead roles, presidents, all that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely amazing to see. But I've also mentored men in the industry as well, and they now work for regulators and run their own companies and things like that. Because I think safety is not something you consciously go, oh yeah, I'm going to grow up and be a HSE professional. I think when you recognise that there's people that really will make a difference in the industry, you really need to grab a hold of them and really develop and foster them in this career. And I think it's, that's really important. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud of, is that the people I am bringing into, the industry are people worth bringing into the industry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Amanda. And I know how important mentoring is to you, and you've been working with OneWish on the mentor program. So thank you for that. Amanda Finnegan.
Well, along with Amanda, the mentoring part was something that, was really satisfying part of your job. And I enjoyed that, and I kind of missed that. But in Alaska, a lot of people became the HSE person on the job site because it was just duties as assigned. And so there weren't a lot of women in the workforce. And so I worked with a couple other HSE professionals and the university, and we started a 4-year degree program in health and safety. And it took a few years, but we really were passionate about getting more people into the field as HSE professionals and not other duties as assigned. And so people that were passionate about it and being able to have a degree in additional education in HSE really opened a lot of doors, whether they were going to stay in Alaska or move on throughout the industry and the rest of the US. So that was something that we became very passionate about, making sure it was a good, solid program, and then be able to help mentor those folks that were in the program. We were all available for that. So that was something that I did really enjoy from my Alaska time.
Yeah, that's amazing, Amanda. I actually never knew that, but it's amazing the lengths that people will go to get off of Alaska.
Yeah.
So
tough. It was tough.
That's part of your succession plan.
I have to say though, that, you know, thinking about all these questions, I always just refer, oh, Alaska was tough. Alaska was tough. And it was, but there were so many good things that came out of it and such good experiences that really shape a person. But, you know, it wasn't all bad, even though sometimes I go there right away. There was a lot of really good things that happened during that time too.
Yeah, and an amazing grounding, right? Amazing way to kind of learn your career and your profession, and dealing with some really kind of difficult situations, you know, not only on the job site, but, you know, in the camps and in the towns, small towns, etc. So thank you for that. So let's talk about, and the other panel mentioned it, was like regrets, if you like, and have you had any regrets in your career?
I suppose, yeah, loads, obviously, loads. I think, do you know what? I think not realizing sooner that a lot of people that you meet along the way are just winging it. That is, you know, if you had to realize that sooner, you might have made different kind of decisions. I think for me personally, some of the decisions I made around the kids and the time that I maybe didn't spend with them, because look, I've always been kind of driven, and I've always been really, really hungry. So I think going back to the point Louise made at the end of the last call, just about kind of taking your time. I didn't take my time. I really rushed the front end of my career. And, you know, I think some of those decisions I made around the time that I spent when my kids were very young, I will definitely always regret.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Anybody else? Jennifer, Amanda?
I have none. And I know that sounds kind of maybe cavalier, but there was no playbook. There was no roadmap. There was no, you know, this is how you got to get from point A to point B. And I think I watched, I listened a lot. I tried to treat people with respect, and I just continued to put my head down and move forward. And for me, you know, things progressed, maybe not as fast as I would have wanted things to progress, but they moved forward. And so, yeah, I, with the knowledge I had at the time to make the decisions and everything else, I don't have any.
Yeah, and I'd probably agree with Jen there as well. I don't have regrets per se. I probably would approach situations a little bit differently, because I look at, you know, if you do regret something, then, you know, that's sort of acknowledging that maybe you haven't made right decisions. But, you know, I think it's all about learning as well. So, you know, I think you take good decisions, bad decisions, it's all part of who you become. So I think it's around acknowledging that, look, you know, certain decisions and certain pathways have led to where you are and where we are now. But I think if there was one thing that I could enhance upon early on in my career, was essentially having the confidence to speak up a little bit more. But then that could have potentially led to a completely different pathway in terms of where I ended up. So so I think, yeah, like similar to Jan, look, absolutely don't have any regrets. Yes, there's probably different decisions I'd make, but, you know, certainly it's all been part of the journey.
So can you give us an example of that, Amanda? And it's very spiritual and holistic, but can you give us an example of not speaking up? Because, you know, there could be someone on this session just now, maybe going through the exact same, maybe not having the confidence to speak up, and maybe concerned about the ramifications or consequences. Yeah,
and I think it goes back to sort of the first question around, you know, when I first started my career in HSE, you know, back in the late 90s, you know, it was an emerging industry. There weren't a lot of women in it. But one of the things that I really faced as a barrier was the way that women treated other women within the industry, and the behaviours that went on, which, you know, as a 20-something-year-old, was absolutely horrifying to see. And it goes back to that fear and intimidation around, well, do I say anything? Do I want to put my career in jeopardy? Do I want to be in the wrath of that particular person? So it wasn't having confidence. So I think what I know now, you know, if I'd sort of say to my younger self, as they talked about in the previous session, just say it. Just say it. You've got to do the right thing. You've got to be ethical. But it's not around conflict resolution. It's not going into conflicts. It's around having critical conversations. So actually pulling people up on their behaviour, but doing it in such a way that it does have that positive approach. So I think going through my career and what I know now and how I approach situations now, if I had that way back early in my career, you know, those conversations and what I witnessed would have been completely different. Because for me, a barrier wasn't being a female in a male-dominated industry. It was the females within a male-dominated industry. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm going to come back to Amanda Finnegan in a minute just to answer this question, but I just want to expand on that like a little, right? Something you said really kind of resonated with me. We look at OneWish, and OneWish is trying to build this kind of network of female health and safety professionals, and that's not the first time I've actually heard that coming from a female in the industry. It was other females that were holding them back. So what I'm saying is, do you think if something like OneWish was, you know, available back then there would be a different attitude where people are trying to give each other a leg up, instead of trying to cut their legs from them?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I ended up joining industry groups just for the sake of joining industry groups to get some perspective of, you know, other industries and, you know, the experience that females were having, because there wasn't a OneWish and there wasn't anything specific for HSE and HSE industry. So I remember joining different types of, you know, networks and groups back in the day, and none of them actually meant anything to me. But I got a lot out of it because I was able to have conversations with other women who were experiencing the same thing, and were able to then look at, okay, well, this is how you could potentially approach a situation. But it was about that camaraderie, which I think is really important. So absolutely, this, like back in 20-something years ago, would have been massively beneficial. Yeah,
we just didn't have anything. We just didn't have anything like this, you know. There wasn't that support there. Certainly all my role models were male role models, and I had amazing role models, but I just didn't have that female network that I do now. And you know, I've spent the last couple of years, particularly in my current role, just surrounding myself with really strong, authentic women that can have my back and that do have my back. But we just didn't have that 20 years ago.
Yeah. You know, as this discussion has been ongoing, it reminded me of before Jacobs, I was with another company and I hired the very first female health and safety lead into this organisation, into the region. And I remember the conversation when I was talking to some of the leaders, the male leaders in the business. And it was along the lines of, because there was none, right? What's she like? I went, she's great. No, but what's she really like? What's she really like? I went, she's great. And that's amazing how much we've come on, and now we can see a lot of kind of the strong bond, the strong networks that are being created by like OneWish and other organisations. So look, I'm going to go back to Amanda on that around regrets. Sorry, Amanda.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, I did have regrets. And honestly, it was, I kind of let the industry change me. People that know me now know that I'm kind of I care a lot about people, you know, cry easily, stuff like that. But when I was going through, you know, working my way into leadership, you didn't show those parts of your personality. So I became quite rigid. It was all facts. It was all statistics. It was all, you know, straight and narrow. So it was me kind of hiding the person that I am. And I would never tell people that I care about them, which is a big part of safety, is that you care and you want people to go home safely and take care of themselves. And that part of me was missing for a big chunk of my time in Alaska. So I think that's one of the reasons it was so hard, is because I wasn't genuine to myself for a while. So, you know, I would tell people now, just, you know, stay true to yourself. You'll be happier in your career. You'll be happier day to day going to work. So I'm glad that I've evolved back, you know, with the help of, you know, the organization, Jacobs right now, especially, to be able to be confident in the person that I am, that I truly am, and be able to express that without being worried about the fact that, well, these are kind of, you know, qualities that people think are awfully feminine, and I want to hide that. So I do regret that I wasn't comfortable enough in myself at that point. So
yeah, but that's that path not being linear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're leading mental health across the Americas, for us, and I think you understand the importance of vulnerability when we are talking about mental health. And I always know that if I've got a call with you coming up in the calendar, that I need to get a box of tissues, just in case.
I get it. I know.
Right.
But Paul, it's also though about, just go back to Amanda's point, it's also about, you know, being really authentic, because people can sniff it out a mile, right? And look, we've all been in front of leaders that aren't authentic, or people that aren't authentic, and you can just spot it a mile away. So it's about as us being kind of female role models, just being ourselves, because if we don't do that, you know, people will know, and they just won't connect with you.
Yeah,
but that's really how the industry has evolved, right? Because, you know, Amanda Finnegan and I were talking earlier, you know, it was like you would do everything in your power to be looked at as the same. You know, we were even talking the other day about pink hard hats, which just pissed me off, right? And I started thinking about it after her and I talked, because she's like, well, why not wear it? And I was just like, my whole career, I didn't want to be looked at as different. I wanted to be looked at as the same. And it was like, to me, the pink hard hat just screamed, you know, just shouted, you're different, you're different. I see that, Yvonne. So, but it was hard. And it was the same as, you know, I had somebody way back when on my team that would show up to the job site and she would bake cookies from her hotel room. You know, she would stay in one of these extended stays, so she could take, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, but we've evolved now, right? And we're in a much different place, and it's okay to be different. It's okay to show the emotions and all that. So
yeah, absolutely. Right, just kind of mindful of time. I'm going to jump to the last question, and if we get time, we'll go to the second last question. So role models been mentioned a few times. So firstly, do you see yourself as a role model? You are all senior females in the business. You touch many thousand people every single day. So do you see yourself as a role model, and did you have a role model? So we'll just open it up.
I don't think I've ever been asked if I'm a role model, so I think that kind of surprised me. But I guess yes. I wouldn't ever come out and, you know, just think that, you know, talking to people, but looking back at, you know, where I am right now, and the fact that I'm accessible for people to talk to and reach out to and mentor, which is, again, something really big within Jacobs. I think, yes, that would be helpful for people to know that you can have a career that changes quite a bit. And as long as you're passionate and driven, that you can really make your career what you want it to be. And then the second part of that is I did have a couple of really strong role models. They were men. There weren't a lot of people, as I've said, in industry when I was coming up, but they were men that had a lot of integrity and treated people well and really cared about health and safety. And so those were the kind of people that I really looked up to, not people that were so driven that they were always going to be, you know, the biggest boss or anything like that. It was the people that conducted themselves with integrity every day. And those are the people that I wanted to be like.
Yeah, I love that answer. Who else is going to jump in?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a few minutes ago. I've been so lucky in my career that I have met the most amazing men who have, you know, really rooted for me in my career and supported me and and helped me both personally and professionally. It's a shame that I didn't have a female role model as I was coming up in my career. But I definitely, in my current role over the last 3 years, although it took me a while to figure it out, I definitely see myself as a role model now. And, you know, some days I spend my whole day just talking to my team on the phone, and I get to the end of the day, I'm like, I actually did no work today, but I did, because I was engaging with them and I was giving them time and I was giving them support and help. And I really am determined to be the role model that I never had grown up as I was coming through my career. And yeah, just really want to make that and be that difference for the team that I never had.
Yeah, good answer. Amanda,
yeah,
Jen?
Yeah, so I'll go into that. Look, it's not really a question around whether we think we are. We are. And we have to be within the industry we're in. And I think it's any industry as well. So I like to think that I'm more of a mentor and a coach and someone who guides somebody, throughout their career. Yes, people do see me as a role model, but I see myself more as the mother hen in terms of bringing the young talent in and really fostering and developing them. But then also looking at people who are changing their career as well. So I think it comes with what we do, because we're trying to lead the industry and people making the right choices to ensure they go home at the end of the day. In terms of role models myself, very similar stories. Obviously, early on in the career, not many sort of females that you could tap into, for role models. I think my first role model, and he's actually still around in my life, actually sort of guided me out of my HR career and into HSE. So he was able to establish me with, some really good networks and contacts to really get an understanding of what the industry was and what it's all about. Without sounding too cheesy, I think the women on this call, so Jan, Fiona and Amanda and, Yvonne, Suki, everybody else, they're role models as well. I see what they do and the amazing work that they're doing as well. And then also you, Paul, like you're an innovator, you challenge the norms, you really push, not only the females in the team, but the males as well. So I think role models are always evolving. They're always changing. There are some that stick with you, but there are some that, do come into your life at a certain point in time to really guide and foster you. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, good answer, Amanda. Thanks. Jen?
Do I look at myself as a role model? I guess I never really kind of self-reflect like that. I guess by default I am. But I never kind of think of myself that way. I just, just do what I do. Was there a role model for me kind of coming up and through? Not really. The longer I was in my career, especially not in safety until probably the last 10 years. But before that, it was more, you'd find somebody in operations that, that I would gravitate to, that I like their style, or I like the way they delivered things, or handled things, and that kind of helped shape me and form me. But it really wasn't until, like I said, probably the past 10 years or so, would I have ever kind of felt that there was somebody in safety that filled that spot.
Yeah, look, that's why, and thanks for that, Jen. Louise spoke about the stats around IOSH membership, right? And that's why it's really important that you guys and every single female on this call sees themselves as role models, because we're not going to attract more females to health and safety unless there are female role models out there, prominent role models out there, championing the cause, being inspirational, being motivational, being that innovator. That's the only way we're going to get more females into the profession. So you need to see yourself as a role model, and I know you act like a role model. So thank you for that. So look, last question. I'm just kind of mindful of time. What are you most proud of in your career? Like, and be brief.
That wasn't on the list, by the way. Just putting that out there.
I think sometimes I stand back from the chaos that's going on in my life, and I think, how the bloody hell have I got through the last 12 years? You know, I've got 3 small kids at home. I have built a career. I have grown both personally and professionally. And when I do stand back on the odd occasion, when I do take a step back and a deep breath, and, you know, my kids are thriving, I've got a really good job, I'm getting to influence an industry the way I am. And I just think, do you know what, you're doing it and you're getting through it. It's not easy, but you've achieved so much in the last couple of years. And I think, you know, we're all very hard on ourselves, and it's just allowing yourself to, as someone said earlier on, celebrate the successes that you have. Because when I get to a Friday and I've managed not to piss anyone off in work too much, my kids have all done their homework, I've managed to get them to all their after school activities, and the house is still standing and I still have a job, I just think, you know what, brilliant.
Yeah, I like that, Fiona. And like, it seems to be a main theme.
When I'm opening that bottle of wine,
yeah.
Amanda, on a Friday night.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's probably most people on this call. Look, I would say mine's a little bit, it's not sort of, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but not down the norms. I think my sort of most proudest moment was actually stepping back from HSE and actually stepping out of my career for 12 months. I got to the point where I was quite burnt out, you know, had very low mental health. And I kind of got to a point of like, you know, going back to Fiona's point, I can wing it through this career and I can really just go to work, get paid, go home. And that was it. I took a conscious step, like I made a conscious choice to step back for 12 months to really just reset myself. And I honestly came back with a bang. And it's probably the best decision I ever made, and probably the most proudest, because it enabled me to be much better at what I do. It enabled me to be a much better mum, you know, a working woman, you know, wife at, you know, one point. So it gave me some more rounded perspective in terms of, you know what, you can do it all. You can absolutely do it all.
Good answer, brilliant, really brave. Jen or Amanda?
Go ahead,
I would
Amanda.
just say mine's very similar to Fiona, just, you know, going through everything and having some challenging times and then making it through the other side, and still loving what you do, and still, you know, being able to keep the family together and have everybody thrive. Because you know, I went from leadership and then moved down in my role, and then realized that was what I needed at the time, was to step back, have a little less pressure and stress, and come out the other side a better person, better at my job, better parent, better wife. So it's just making it through all of that and being persistent at knowing what I wanted, and you know, just being a little bit driven. So I was just happy to make it out the other side and be here. So
Jen?
I'd probably say when I was younger, I was terrified, absolutely terrified of change. I didn't like change, didn't want to change. I just status quo, just like doing the same thing. And what I'm probably the most proud of is my ability to embrace change and lower those walls and try different things. And it's allowed me to go down so many different avenues in my career and see just breathtakingly amazing projects and programs and people that I've been able to work with and be part of, that it's just amazing. So embracing change is probably the thing that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, look, that's, you know, and that's a surprise to me actually, because you are, I would say, one of those who do embrace change really well. You don't have blinkers on. If I have some harebrained idea, you consider it. You don't have blinkers. And I've asked you a couple of times about moving region, moving job, and you've always been open to it. So that's a surprise to me around the change. Look, I think the basis of this is that each of you are proud of where you are in your career, and you should be really proud of it, because I see the contribution that you make on a daily basis to the culture in Jacobs, to the growth of the occupational health and safety teams that you lead. And I'm just really kind of proud that we all work together and we're all part of the one team and pushing each other on and really looking to raise that bar in everything we do. And I just really want to thank you for that, and also thank you for obviously agreeing to do this session. So I'm out of questions. I don't know if there's any questions there, or I don't know if you guys want to ask me any questions, you know, being like, I don't know how many men there are actually on this call.
Yeah, look, I think just going back to Amanda's point for a minute about you, and you'll absolutely hate this, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know, I don't think for the four of us here in the call, I don't think any of us would be as successful at Jacobs if it wasn't for the support that you give, not just to us, but every single female on our team. You're just a tremendous role model for us all, and not just us, but you're a tremendous role model for all women in our industry. And you know, on behalf of myself and Jennifer and the two Amandas, just want to thank you for that.
I'm going to kill you.
Are you mortified?
Yeah.
Well said, Fiona. Well said. We rehearsed that as well, Paul.
So any other questions? No?
Is there any? Have we any on the panel, or on the, sorry, not the panel, any on the chat?
No. Hi there, ladies and Paul. Thank you so much. Yes, so no questions have come through the chat, but we did have a lot of chat and comments. The pink heart piece did trigger a few responses. I know I joined into that personally as well. But no, just want to say thank you, because looking at the time, you know, Paul, thanks for leading this session. Thank you for your support of OneWish and all you've been doing and, you know, continue to do to break the bias. So thank you, ladies, you know, for sharing your stories, you know, being vulnerable and open to sharing your stories. Because I think it's always good to hear, you know, the experiences people have had, you know, and you all have shared some of the positives and, you know, the negatives, but how it's made you where you are today. So I think that was really insightful. So we really appreciate you all coming and sharing this today. Really motivating and empowering stories. So I just want to say thanks again to Jacobs for supporting this event. I will connect with all of you all if that's okay on LinkedIn. I love following amazing women in health and safety.